We have made it past 10 episodes. We are here, baby.
It's a miracle, honestly.
Want to welcome my co-host to the episode, Daniela Alzate, my wifey. I'll also introduce the other co-host, myself, Juan and Dani. Excited to be here. Epi number 11. For those that maybe are tuning in for the first or second time, the word Alza means something specific and dear to our hearts. It can mean many things, but what are the things that we want to help our community get from the Alza podcast, my love?
So Alza means to raise, to lift, to carry. We want to just encourage believers in every season of their lives. We want to lift their faith. We want us to carry each other's burdens by just sharing testimonies throughout our time together, and to raise, to lift, and just raise each other up.
I love that. And this is part 3 of a 4-part series regarding our relationship, our love story. Part 1 was all about friendship, the beginning, the initial stage. Part 2 was about dating. And today we're going to be talking about part 3, all about engagement. Next week, episode 12, you don't want to miss it. It is about marriage season. So no matter what season you find yourself in, I believe this is great insight, biblical principles that you could apply and that are transferable all the way across every single season. You know, something that I heard a couple of years ago as our kids were just recently born was that the success of every season that you go into is not in the future, but it is in the present. Depending on how you live the current season that you're in, you will have an easier, smoother, more successful transition, if you will, into the next season. And so that's why I think it's so important, just the transition or the progression of these seasons.
I love that. And for today's episode 11, we are going to be talking about understanding God's timing. And we're going to be talking about our engagement season and how we were able to really see God's hand and his timing in our lives. Are you ready, baby?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's get started.
Welcome to Alza Podcast, where we dive into the heart of authentic Christianity.
Join us each week as we discuss the challenges and the joys of living out our faith in today's world.
Whether you're a lifelong believer, new in the faith, or just curious about the Christian journey, there's something here for everyone. So today's topic, understanding God's timing. Specifically, we're talking about our engagement season, but really this topic of understanding God's timing is incredibly important to any Christian. And you know, today specifically, we were talking about one of our favorite words, timing. Really, God's timing is just so important, and it's, I think, one of the most difficult things to understand as a Christian, because our timing and our ways are completely different than God's timing and his ways. But I think there's something so special about learning how to hear his voice, learning how to understand his timing, and also learning how to honor him, submit to him, and you submit to those that are around him that he's placed in your life. And so with that being said, let's kick it off talking about our season, our engagement season, babe. Tell us about, you know, the before the engagement. So transitioning out of friendship into engagement, kind of that transition. What did it look like? What do you remember?
Well, you mean transitioning out of dating into the engagement season?
That's what I meant.
Yes. So I feel like towards the end of our dating season, it was looking kind of rough in the sense of we were becoming adults, and we were realizing that our childhood mentality, playing games, kind of kiddish ways was not going to be a good foundation for marriage. And even though we've known about the Lord, we can still be emotionally immature, and our capacity to be spiritually mature is also really correlated with our emotional maturity.
Yeah.
And I think that for us specifically, that transition from our dating season to our engagement season was us really being refined in our emotional maturity and making decisions that in our character. Who do we want to be? What kind of a marriage do we actually now want to have? Because it's getting closer to the time that we can get married, according to what my parents had established for us, since we started dating very young. I think you had mentioned it last episode, but there did come a time where you started your real estate job at 18 and you were starting to make big boy kind of money, and you felt a little bit more comfortable asking my dad if we can kind of move the deadline of
expedite the process.
Yeah. And my dad said no, he would feel honored if we would wait until you and I both had a bachelor's degree, because that's what he wanted, and you did that. And I forget at times how, you didn't really even have anybody giving you that expectation that you needed to finish school. But my dad asked that of you to honor him, to marry me. And so I think that was a big part of, the refinement process as far as timing is concerned, which is what we're discussing. And I think that when it comes to timing, understanding authority, and like you had mentioned, the people that God has placed over you to cover you, whether that be spiritually or physically, like your parents, honoring them is a really big part of God's timing, because if we would have chosen to get, engaged around the time that we wanted to expedite it,
no, it would have been
bad,
chaotic. Well, let's talk about it. So I think there's two phases or two parts to the story of our engagement. I think there was an initial one, which was premature, if you will, and definitely more emotional. That was when we were still early in college. We were probably I was probably 20.
Yeah.
Honestly, 20.
Yeah.
I was probably 20 years old. So I was probably a junior or sophomore, junior in college. So when that happened, I spoke to your dad. He gave me the answer that you just kind of mentioned, which was great. Then there was a second moment, which I think this is where I really want to hone in on for the rest of the epi. And this was 2018, May of 2018. And, I sat your parents down because you had graduated. The moment came. You graduated. I threw you a big surprise party that you were really scared in the moment when these little, what are those things called? Those poppers went off. And as I look back at the video, I'm like, I just left you after that because I had to go park the car because I dropped you off in the front. Anyways, so, that month, May of 2018, I sat down with your parents and I told them, hey, I'd like to ask for your blessing, if you will, to marry your daughter. And they asked me the question, well, when are you thinking about asking her? And I said to them, I think 2019, September of 2019, for her birthday, I'd like to surprise her on a trip in DC. And they said they were okay with it. We prayed about it. We talked about what it would look like, more or less. Great. Fast forward 3 weeks, not even a month, maybe a month at most. And what happened? Because this is your part. Now you take it. Tag.
So 3 weeks later, you and I go ring shopping.
No, before that.
No? What happened?
We went to, ring shopping.
Yeah, we went ring shopping. Yeah. So we wanted to do this whole experience, and I became a ring diamond connoisseur, and I learned all of these different things about, rings. And so we wanted to do the experience together, which is not really traditional. Traditional is, the fiance, the male buys a ring, but
we like to do everything together.
So we went to go do that. And I'm not expecting anything of it. And I'm thinking we're just going to this appointment, going to go see some different jewelers. And then right after we finish, that just meant that now we have an idea. Now he has an idea of what I like, and that was it.
Yeah, that was it. We didn't go with the intention of buying anything.
At that moment,
it was just to kind of get the ball rolling. So after that, I had already kind of placed this meeting for Dani an appointment for Dani to see a venue, and it was a nice venue that she was interested in. But
wait, hold on. It was my dream venue. So as a little girl, not everybody, but as a little girl, some of us have that dream of that place where you want to get married. And for me, it was always this specific hotel, specifically because their main ballroom is like a rotunda. And so I was always in love with the Beauty and the Beast and their love story, and it was,
Are you calling
famous.
You're calling me a beast?
I'm definitely calling you a beast. No, and so that rotunda theme was always like, and then for me, like in DC, I worked there for a couple of months, and
Just
Capitol.
like you like the style.
I love that style.
Yeah, it speaks to you.
And it's just so specific because of how the Lord works. So Juan had made an appointment to surprise me to go see it in person because I hadn't actually been. It was always a dream, but it was definitely one of those dreams that you don't really think is ever going to be true, because it was definitely a more high-end venue, and we had agreed that we wanted to
stick to the budget.
Yeah, stick to the budget.
Take out a loan or anything.
No, we wanted to pay our own wedding. And so when he said, "Oh, I have a surprise for you," this is after our appointment to see rings. I'm like, "Yeah, okay, great. What's the surprise?" He's like, "Oh, I have an appointment at the Colonnade." I was like, "Wait a second. What do you mean?" I'm like type A rule follower. To me, this is like, no,
I'm
you're
a rule
not.
follower
No,
too.
you're not. This is like outside of my comfort zone 100%, because A, I didn't have the ring. B, I definitely didn't feel like I was going to be able to afford anything there. So I just felt completely out of place.
And also we had talked about, this is a month after I spoke to your parents. We had talked about getting engaged the next year. So it'd be like getting married in like 2.5 years or whatnot.
Because then we wanted to be engaged for an actual
for a year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, everything about this appointment
Didn't
and
really line
surprise, was not exciting to me at all. I was like so nervous, and I was not about it. But then whatever, he convinced me to go.
We got there, and it was strange because the first thing that the lady did, I still remember her name. I won't say it, but she sat us down. Usually when you go places, you get a tour first before you get seated, and you start talking about numbers or dates. And the first question she asked is, "What date do you have?"
And we both looked at each other, and we were very confused, just because at that moment she had already noticed that we weren't actually engaged. And so then we looked at her and we were like, well, since we're not really engaged, we're just kind of, touring, I guess, venues to see even, what may be feasible or not. And she said, okay, well, the reason why I'm asking you this question is because today corporate had just started this brand new package for couples to be able to receive the all-inclusive gold star package and get married at our hotel for X amount of dollars. And then we look at each other at that moment, because that was, I guess, the number that we had both agreed to, feeling comfortable paying for our wedding. And then she said, you would be able to have everything all inclusive, the chairs, the linens, the curtains, whatever you want with this pricing. However, the only caveat would be that
you have to get married before the end of the year. And that was June. And we had talked about getting engaged the following year and lasting in a 1-year engagement and then getting married.
And he had just had this conversation with my parents.
Like 3 weeks before.
And we were literally just looking at rings. So at that moment, I got kind of nervous, but then I saw Juan and you were really excited. You were like, we're getting married.
Yep.
And then that instantly got me very excited as well. But then nervous at the same time, because then I thought to myself, wait, how am I gonna have this conversation with my parents now after the conversation that they've had with Juan? And so I was starting to panic a little bit at that moment, just because I was feeling all the feelings. And then on our way out of then actually we got the tour.
Yeah, we got the tour. It went extremely well. We were happy. We said, hey, we need to get back to you because this was not in the plan. So it went really well. After that, we went to Miracle Mile, and we started walking across Miracle Mile, which is very well known for having great wedding dresses. And this is where I told Dani, right behind the hotel, literally in one of the exits in the back part, I told her, hey, why don't you just go inside and just look? And little did I know, her looking lasted 3 hours as I was outside waiting for her to come out.
Well, first of all, to conclude the venue story, we had said to her, we'll get back to you. She said, okay, you need to get back to me within the next couple of days. And we said, okay, what is the last date that we could get married on for us to be able to be a part of this like package? And she had said, well, it looks like December 21st would be the absolute last day that we could get married. So I said, okay, well, thank you. Here I am now entering a wedding dress boutique store because my wonderful boyfriend at that time, he wasn't even my fiance, gave me once again another idea to just go and see. And as I'm looking at all of the dresses, these dresses were extremely expensive. They were beautiful. I'm already panicking, nervous because of the whole wedding venue situation. And I'm looking through these dresses and I'm just so confused as to why I'm even in that store. All of a sudden, the lady that was at the, I guess, cash register just walks up to me and she says, hi, is there anything I can help you with? And I'm like, hi, thank you so much. No, I'm just looking. And, in my very Dani self, I just kind of start telling her everything that had just happened. And I got to share with her a little bit about our love story and how we met, when we were younger. And all of a sudden she started getting very excited and she just literally told me, okay, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I have to help you. Like, I feel like there's something about your story. There's something about your energy. And I mean, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know about energies, but I do love the Lord and he's been very good to me as of now. And so she's like, okay, well, I honestly don't know why I think, but I think I designed your wedding dress. And I'm like, what do you mean you think you designed my wedding dress? There's no way. And she's like, yeah, there's 2 dresses that didn't make the new collection, but they're not from the old collection. They're just 2 dresses I didn't include and I didn't know what to do with. And so I want you to see these dresses. And I said, okay, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. I don't want to waste your time. I cannot afford your dresses, but thank you so much for even entertaining kind of this miracle moment in my life.
Miracle moment on Miracle Mom.
And she's like, no, can you please explain, just explain to me what does your dream wedding dress look like? And so I began to tell her every little detail because I had that also. And I explained to her I wanted a 3/4 sleeve and off the shoulder and lace and, mermaid, but not too tight and more of like an A-line just fitted and just very specific as to exactly what I wanted. And
then in that moment, the lights came off.
No.
A star came out. No. And the dress came out of the roof.
Well, the lights didn't turn off. No stars came out, but she did say, I designed your dress. It's one of those 2 dresses. That's exactly what she said. And so then I said, okay, I mean, there's no way, but let's do it. And she said, okay, look. And then I found myself in a dressing room and
with the dress on.
She came in. No, she came in. She showed me both of the dresses. And yeah, one of them was exactly what I had described. And so she's like, okay, you need to try on this dress. I guess I designed this for you and I didn't know. And then I'm like, okay. So then she leaves me in the dressing room by myself and I'm putting on this wedding dress. I don't have an engagement ring. Okay. My sisters and my mother are not with me. And so I started tearing up. Okay. And I actually started crying because I said to myself, I'm like, God, I didn't think it would be like this. I don't know what is happening. But all I know is that I envisioned this moment with my mom and my sisters. And at that moment is when I remember so vividly the Lord whispering to my heart, I know it's not what you wanted, but I wanted it just like this. And I wanted to give you your dream dress. And so I felt that as I'm putting on this dress and it looks so beautiful on me. And she walks in and she's like, wow, this is exactly how I envisioned this dress to look on a person. And I said to her, I'm like, look, I'm so thankful, but I couldn't even ask you for a discount on this dress. I can't afford it. And then she said to me, I want to gift it to you. I'll only just ask you to pay for the alterations. And And she said to me, she's like, there's something missing on this dress, and it's something that I had not told her until that moment. And I said, well, what's missing? And she said, she leaves the dressing room again. I find myself alone. And then she comes back and she has this beautiful tulle skirt. And she's like, I always had seen this dress with this skirt. And something that she didn't know was that I had always wanted a skirt, or like a two-part thing of a dress where I can use my dress in two different ways. And it was exactly what I had always wanted and envisioned. And honestly, that is the story of, okay. And so then I walk out of that store. Juan's still waiting outside. You're laughing.
Does anybody ask, or has anybody thought, where am I during this time? Where am I?
He's literally, we were like eating chips or something outside.
No, I was on my phone with the city Wi-Fi. I didn't have LTE. I remember. I don't know what I was playing. I was waiting for 3 hours. I would text her. She wouldn't answer. I would call. She wouldn't answer. I couldn't go in. They'd kick me out. They'd tell me not to go in. It was very confusing.
Yeah. And so now I was panicked. Now I was like, okay, wait a second. I have no idea how I'm going to tell my parents everything that just happened without them feeling like this was all planned or all conspired. And so I think I called my best friend at that time, and I was crying hysterical, and she was so confused because she was like, wait, are you happy? Are you sad? And I'm like, no, I'm so happy, but I'm so nervous because I don't know what my parents are going to feel about the timing. And I think that this is where it really turns into kind of what we want to talk to you all about regarding timing. Because actually, when I got home that evening and I began to tell my mom the whole entire story, and up until this moment, I just saw God's hand and in the details and everything that I've ever wanted just becoming so accessible, which was miraculous because none of it really was. All of a sudden, as I'm sharing all of these things with my mom, I'm thinking, well, if God gave me all of this experience until now, well, then as I'm telling this to my mom, he's going to give her that peace. But it was quite the opposite.
Yeah.
She quite literally said, I don't understand why it has to be like this. I don't agree that it should look like this. And end of story, we're not going to get your dad involved because I don't want him to break your heart and break your dreams. So
that was it.
That was it. And I cried myself to sleep that night. And I remember telling you and crying, saying that, okay, I guess it's not going to happen how we thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just remember crying and saying, okay, Lord, like I'm going to give this to you because I really thought that you were giving it to me, but now it's like not.
Yeah. And
so I cried, and then I slept. And then the next morning, my mom comes in my room and she's like, I didn't sleep last night. And I'm like, okay, I slept very well. And she was like, I just really, despite my initial reaction and how I was feeling, I just really feel that God really gave me the peace that this is kind of how it was. This is how your story is going to look like. And it is very different. It is very outside of what you had expressed to me earlier. But I think this is how it's going to happen. And I think that you and Juan are going to get married here. And it was all in the matter of like less than 24 hours, literally all of these feelings and emotions.
Yeah,
and
it was a huge roller coaster. Up, down, upside down. Yeah.
But I think that just trusting that the Lord his hand was in it, and believing that his timing was there is what really helped me understand that God's timing, the way that we know that it is his timing and his hand, is if there's peace.
Yeah. And I think that's what we saw from that, because there could have been different ways
That it could have been handled.
That it could have been handled, that we could have responded. I think initially when we brought the news to your mom, you know, we were just very much like, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're feeling. But we were not fighting back to her. We were not being disobedient or
disrespectful
or saying, hey, we have to have it our way and this is going to happen, which, you know, everything on the outside, quote unquote, seemed like, why wouldn't we? Right. But even then, you know, we said, hey, you know what? We're going to submit, if you will. We're going to let it go. And, you know, the fact that it happened the next day, I mean, that's literally only God. But because we were able to let it go in the moment, I think that speaks higher to not just respecting your mom and your parents and honoring them, but really honoring God. Because we could have done it. We could have submitted to your parents, let go of it, you know, in the moment in front of them, but in our hearts towards them and towards the situation, just been completely bitter. And I think that's the thing about God's timing, that it is just so out of our context that the more we can just align to Him and trust in Him, it allows for everything else to come to the surface. And that's why I think God's timing is gold, because it really will prove to you your intentions, your desires. And if we could be honest, I think about, you know, what King David says, like, search me, O heart, test my anxious heart, test my anxious thoughts, and know my ways. That's a scary prayer. Like, test me, O Lord, and know my anxious thoughts. Like, we are giving God a space, number one, to test us, and number two, to actually allow the vulnerable thoughts to come out. And so in our case, in your case, maybe you're in the waiting for an engagement. Maybe you're waiting for that specific special friendship or the dating to become or to start. Or maybe you're waiting to get married and you've been engaged for a year, 2 years, or a month, or whatever.
Or you're married and you're praying for a child and that hasn't, you know,
hasn't materialized. It hasn't happened. Whatever it looks like, you know, I've learned to ask this question instead of the latter, you know, not why, but what for. So ask what for, not why, God. And so the more we ask what for, it gives us a bigger picture into purpose and not doubt. The more I can ask, Lord, help me understand what for. There's something more that you're doing in this situation that is clashing against my time. There's something greater that you're doing. And when you start praying that, when you start believing that, it almost allows you to take a step back and see, okay, Lord, like, I can't understand it now, but you will speak to me then. And so for us, I mean, it sounds almost, I don't know what the word is, but maybe kind of silly. Like, oh, well, you're just saying that because, you know, a day after, like, your mom said yes and you got engaged. Yeah, sure. But it took 7 years to get there. You know, like, it took 7 years of dating. It took us breaking up a couple times. It took me going through my pornography issue. It took me going through a very challenging situation that I had to confess in 2017. And we'll talk about in next episode a little bit more in detail, that had to set us up for engagement. I mean, it just took so much. And so don't be surprised how God does his things, his ways, and in his timing, you know. And I think that's what's the beautiful thing about obedience and waiting on God, is that it expedites blessing. But disobedience delays God's blessings. But when we allow God's timing to rule over us, it's just so much better. And I think that's what trumped at the end of the day in our case.
Yeah, I think something that you mentioned that is also key is this concept of releasing control and really believing that if you are a child of God, if you have believed God and believed Jesus to be your Lord, the Lord of your life, then when things happen that are outside of your control, you can, if you come from the mindset or have the perspective that things are not just happening to you, but they're happening for you, because at the end of the day, God's sovereignty is so much greater than all the little things that we can plan, then you're really able to surrender that anger and that bitterness that may come with things coming not in your way and not in your plan. And so in that moment, when I was just so filled with so many emotions, and then I went to speak to my mom, and I didn't receive what I thought I should have received, because everything seemed to be lining up, and she was just completely just no about it. I felt like, you know what? After everything that I've gone through in this relationship with Juan, because he mentioned it was 7 years leading up to this moment, I have now come to terms that things don't just happen to me just because. This is happening for me. And I was so thankful that, at the first time that we talked about engagement with my father, he delayed it and postponed it. And then I learned so many things after about Juan, about myself, that wow, I was like, okay, if we would have gotten engaged then, it would have been a disaster. When this moment came, then I was like, okay, well, I thought it was the perfect case scenario, but if it's not, then okay, Lord, like I'm going to trust in you. And just being able to have that perspective as a believer, I think can help us mature and grow in our faith. But in order to get there, it is so important to work on our relationship with God. You can't trust something that you don't know.
And I think that the two practical things that I wanted to just mention regarding God's timing is that when we wait on God's timing, it gives us clarity and it purifies our motives. And so if we could trust in God's timing, it gives us clarity, not just in a relational aspect, in a relationship, in a friendship, dating, engagement, marriage, across the board, an investment, a big decision, healing, whatever it is. When you wait on God's timing, when you just wait more, it gives you clarity. And so that sets you up well across the board for everything else. And it tests your motive, because at the end of the day, we could have gotten our way. We could have signed the paperwork in the moment and said, hey, you know what? This makes sense. We're adults. Like, you graduated. I'm graduating next month.
Yeah,
like
we were full grown adults.
Yeah, we could have done that and pulled it that way. But the motives of the heart, the Bible talks about in Proverbs, that everything you do flows from the heart, that we have to protect it above everything else. And Jeremiah says it this way: the heart is so deceitful, it is beyond cure. Who can understand it? And I just think that God blesses when we are obedient to his timing, which most of the time, 99.99% of the time, lags our timing. But the biggest difference is God knows what we need, and not versus what we want, right? Which we might think we want this, but God knows what we need at the end of the day. So I think that was honestly the biggest takeaway. As I look back now at our life, it really helped bring clarity, and it just tested our hearts and our intentions.
I have a question for you. What would you say is another kind of like practical way of knowing, like, is this a good time for, to make this decision? Like, how, if I'm, a person in whatever season of my life, and they're learning about the Lord, and they're learning about, his timing, like, what is something else that you would say to look out for? Because I think, practically speaking, I had mentioned peace. You mentioned, practically speaking, that like obedience.
Yeah. Well, obedience is linked to his word, right? It's tied to his word. So we would never do not that we would never do, but if we're going to honor God's timing, we also honor his way. So that's straight up just linked to the Bible and correlated with the Bible, so I can't say, well, God, I'm honoring you and your way and your time, if what I'm doing is going outside of what the word says.
I love that.
And so because part of what the word says is honor your father and your mother, not depending on who they are or what they do, or if their thoughts are right regarding if you should get married now or not. No. Like, we made a decision. You know what? This kind of stinks because everything makes sense, quote unquote, right now, but we're going to honor them. And God showed up for us. So I think just you need to submit to the word first. I think that's a big practical I think another practical is what helps is just having the right people around you. And we've talked about this before in previous episodes, but the first thing you did that day too, after we talked, you called a really close mentor of yours and one of our pastors. So that helped too, you know, kind of to get that perspective and that advice. So I think those are just two practical things. And the last thing I'll say, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say, don't forget what you were going to say, but I forgot
I think
that.
I'm going to forget.
No,
I won't forget.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things I remember that after, you know, I cried myself to sleep, but I prayed my heart out. And
you were able to offload it.
I offloaded it to the Lord. And I think that sometimes we think that prayer is you just asking the Lord for things, but like prayer is also just like letting it out.
Yeah,
and
King David do that all the time.
And I remember just being like, I am so confused right now, Lord. I'm so confused. You literally the entire day were speaking to me and showing me the miracles that were these things, that these prayers that I've been praying for years, because I've been wanting, at that point, I don't know, 12, 13-year-old girl. Well, actually 15 when we got together. And I've always been focused on marriage being the goal. And so like I had been praying about my engagement, my dress, where I'm going to get it for years. And the entire day I'm literally seeing these things being dangled,
coming alive.
Coming alive before my eyes. And I just remember crying to the Lord, and I was saying, I'm so hurt right now, Lord. I'm so confused. Like I cannot, like my heart is just so vulnerable, you know, but have your way, you know. I'm still upset. I'm not saying like now everything's perfect and like it's okay, like I'm gonna trust in you. Like no, I'm still upset, but have your way, because I know that you are still good. And so again, for him to turn it around within a couple hours in my mom's heart and that whole thing, like
that's literally only God, because also your mom is not
let's put context. My mother is a God-fearing woman who is not an emotional, you know, impulsive woman. Like she has the gift of discernment. Like this woman is not, you know, one to be messed around with, you know. So that even was more hurtful for me, because this is a person that I not only admire and respect and I am totally submitted to, but whose opinion is totally important to my decision making. And so for her to not have felt that type of peace that I felt throughout the entire day and just being so excited, and she completely felt the opposite. She felt just, you know, alarmed and not filled with peace in that moment. When I shared that news with her, I was like, okay, Lord, just have your way. But I think all of that to say is that prayer, I feel like, was a huge component to just letting it go in that moment and not harboring it and not letting it harbor in my heart. Yeah,
I think those two things, right? So submitting to the word, prayer, obviously having the right people around us, we mentioned it as well, helps bring that clarity. It helps test our motives and it helps purify our intentions. And then the last thing I would say, I think it's so hard for people, specifically in this area of relationships, of dating, of engagement, marriage, etc. Like it's so difficult for them to do it in a godly, honoring way. Because if you really think about what the issue is with wanting to do it our way versus God's way, it has to do with our insecurities and the challenges that we've been through, that we're just trying to fill a void with a person, whatever that looks like. And so I think it's easier, let me say it this way, I think it's easier to honor God in other areas, but when it comes to this one, like relationally, it's a challenge.
Like you would say that maybe not just that you're trying to fill, you know, your heart with a person, but I think maybe what you're trying to allude to is just that it is such a heart wrenching and emotional thing.
Yeah.
Like that, maybe it's not an emotional decision or you're not an impulsive, but like it just involves
so
emotions.
And so,
all of the emotions are intertwined.
The lack of time and God's time, it just makes it so much harder. So I would just, to anybody listening, the last encouragement piece of advice I would give you is to remind you, and you could literally look this up in the word, you know, when we wait on the Lord, that's what the word talks about, as we wait on the Lord, our strengths are renewed. Waiting is not a passive trait. It is actually a proactive trait. And so the terminology that we know in our society of waiting, it is a tiring aspect. It is slow. But when you wait on God, this Dani's one of her favorite songs says, the slower I go, the faster I arrive. The slower we go, we're actually able to hear God's voice. Because I learned this not too long ago. God's voice is never in a hurry. It's never in a rush. And many times we are rushing and we are hurrying our way, and then we get it our way, and then we ask ourselves, well, God, why didn't you send me a message? Why didn't you stop it? Well, you were too rushed and too busy doing it your own way and at your own pace. So you wanted it so bad, you got it. And then we're asking all these questions, right? So my biggest encouragement would just be to wait on the Lord in a proactive way. What does that mean? Go into your word, be prayed up, be around some good people, be in community, give time before you get engaged and you're dating someone, because we're talking about engagement, right? Give it a little bit more time. See how that person is reacting, without you giving them all the attention every single day. How are they reacting in circles? How are they treating their parents? How are they managing their finances? How are they, whatever it is, from the spiritual to the emotional, to the physical, to the practical. This is the person you're going to marry, which is huge. It is one of the biggest decisions of your life after salvation. So I would encourage you to get in your word and get plugged into a community. It seems like that's the same advice that we always give people.
But it is
but it is godly.
It is godly.
And it is timeless. And that is the firm foundation that literally the Bible is built on. It's God and his people. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I'm very excited to kind of conclude our season with our episode for next time, that we'll talk a little bit about that transition into marriage. I think just to conclude this episode, our actual engagement was so beautiful, and it was so special. By the time that we got engaged, we actually had already secured the venue and my dress before.
And the ring.
And because you were proposing.
I was proposing, yeah.
That was completely outside of the way that I would have envisioned my engagement and all of that. But
I totally agree with that. And before we pray to close, I also just want to acknowledge maybe a specific group of people that might be listening to this. Maybe you are in a dating season, or maybe even in a season of where you are engaged, and maybe the person that you started to love, to like, maybe you're seeing some signs or seeing some things that you're like, this is not the person who I thought I was going to marry or that I was going to be with. And I just want to remind you that it is not too late to make a decision and to seek godly counsel, to pray, because this is a big decision. And I know some people that I've talked to and I've pastored, some people think, I'm in too deep. I've already been with this person for 4, 5, 6 years. Well, I might as well get married already because of all the history that we have. And how am I going to start over? And how am I going to find somebody else when they're not in a healthy place and they're not in a God honoring relationship? I could tell you that taking that into marriage is a whole nother level. And so don't allow the enemy, your emotions, your past, and the history to force you into making this decision of getting married or getting engaged because of this previous history that you have. And so I also want to pray for those people that are maybe struggling with maybe that decision, that maybe they are with somebody, that they've been with somebody for so long that they have no other way out. But I would pray that the Lord would give you strength. So Lord, thank you for this opportunity to speak, to share our story, Lord, which really is your story, Lord. It's all about you. And I thank you because just like King David, Lord, when we invite you into our hearts, Lord, when we ask you to examine us, to test our anxious thoughts, not only do you leave us there, you guide us into that last part of that verse, which is guide us into an everlasting way, into an everlasting path, that there's peace, that there's hope. And so I pray for anybody who is feeling hopeless, maybe in a current relationship, that it's been happening for a while and they feel like there's no other person, no other way out, and that they're stuck. God, I pray that you would give them the strength to follow you more than they follow the other person. Lord, thank you, God, for those that maybe are right now just waiting proactively, Lord. And maybe some of those that are listening right now are being challenged by waiting proactively and feel like it is a passive trait. Lord, I pray that today would be a reminder, Lord, that waiting on you, we could do it proactively as we're growing, Lord. And that the slower that we go with you, really we arrive much quicker than the rest of those around us that perhaps don't know you, Lord. Thank you for this opportunity to minister, Lord. And for anybody who is married or is engaged, God, I pray that you would lift them up in whatever areas, Lord, that they are in need of. And I also pray that we would be light into other marriages and other couples, all of us, those that are listening today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Alza Podcast, where we explore the depths of authentic Christianity together.
We hope you found inspiration and insight that will raise, lift, and carry your faith to the next level.
You can find us on all podcast streaming platforms, and don't forget to subscribe.
Stay connected with us on social media for more discussions, resources, and community.
God bless.